As you can see, I went to the farmer's market this morning. I went a little crazy. Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today we are continuing our 6 weeks of spooky sewing with another fall-tacular, wow that was terrible, dress. So right now I'm kind of alternating between spooky and autumn. So we are on another autumn day, and first let's talk about the fabric for this project. So this is the fabric for this project. I think it's absolutely stunning. This is another piece of fabric from the dressmaking factory that I went to last September. I think this is like a really fun fall fabric. I feel like the orange is what makes it fall for me. It's kind of more warm toned as opposed to like cooler toned and springy. This dress is actually another dress I made using fabric out of the factory. This has a very similar texture and feel as the one that makes up this dress. So I'm really excited to work with it. I think it's gonna make such a darling dress. And I can't wait to see exactly what it makes. Hi, baby. You can do it. Wow, so athletic. You did it. Spooky is really hyper right now for some reason. So this is the fabric. I have 6 yards of this, so I won't use it all in this project. So I think I'll make like a pair of shorts, overalls, or something cute like that with it. I do have this pattern here. I got influenced off TikTok. I saw somebody make a dress with this pattern and I thought was absolutely darling. I really like it. Has these like puff sleeves and these ruffles along the bottom. I'll be making the mini skirt, which it looks like requires me to use about 3 yards-ish. So I should have plenty left over to make like a jumpsuit or a pair of shorts with. And I really like this dress too because everything that makes it tight is elastic, so it should be really size flexible, which is always great. So the description for this pattern is: the dress with elastic casings at the midriff has a back zipper U-shaped neckline, short set-in puff sleeves, gathered with elastic casings, forming self ruffles. Mini length V1 has double ruffles at lower edge. That's the version I'll be doing. They do have a maxi version, but I just think this will look cuter on me as a mini. So yeah, I'm really excited. My plan is to have the pattern going like side to side. Like you see how there's these kind of like weird abstract shapes. I plan on having that going around my body as opposed to up and down, I think. So that is kind of the plan for this. This is going to be a pretty simple project. It only has 5 pieces to it, 5 pattern pieces. I think this will be pretty straightforward and pretty easy and end up with something really flexible and cute. So let's go ahead and hop into cutting out this fabric. Sorry for the weird lighting on this clip. Usually my camera adjusts the lighting properly, but today's not that day. Here, I just wanted to show you guys the initial steps I do. I do this usually off camera, but I iron all of the fabric and the pattern before I end up cutting it. So this is another part of the work before I actually end up cutting out the pattern. Cutting out this pattern was really straightforward. The most challenging part was making all the marks to place where the elastic and the ruffle was going to go. I just usually am not marking quite this much, and this fabric did weird things with my pen. So that was an experience, but yeah, this was fairly straightforward and also not that many pieces, which is always nice because as you guys know, cutting is not my favorite part. Well, good afternoon. I planned on getting started much earlier than I did. I was gonna start at noon and it's now 1:30. This dress I anticipate won't take that long to make. It's really quite simple. The thing that'll take the longest will be putting in the elastic. I'm feeling like I can take this chilling at my own pace. I don't think I'll finish it today because I'm starting so late, but I did have like a nice slow morning. We've had like our first kind of crispier autumn morning today, and so I just kind of enjoyed that. But now I'm feeling more energized and ready to get sewing, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So with that, let's go ahead and hop into sewing. So another thing I often do off camera is for the interfacing. If it's small pieces, I a lot of times trace them because it's easier to cut them narrower before I actually cut them out, because in most cases you want your interfacing to not be seen, which means you need to make sure the facing covers it, and then you also don't want the interfacing in your seam lines. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm cutting and making the narrower pieces of the interfacing. And then here I'm cutting that out. I hate cutting interfacing. I don't know why. It's just always very difficult to get through and not my favorite. As always, my first step is putting it in the darts. There were only, I think, 4 darts in this pattern, which is always my fave as I find this part tedious. Then I am pressing the dart. It is important to do the dart now because you need the darts in to do the interfacing. For the interfacing, I am putting on my towel, which I use as a pressing cloth, and then I am just ironing that down until it sticks. I used to be bad about using a pressing cloth for this step, but I had to clean my iron of stickiness enough that I'm now pretty good about it. Once I've done it through the pressing cloth, I then turn it around and I do it over the top to just make sure it's really stuck down. And then my first steps, according to the pattern instructions, is to sew the basically shoulders of the interfacing as well as the shoulders of the actual garment. So I'm pinning them here and then finishing the seams and pressing them. These interfacing definitely press it weird. I think I maybe didn't get things lined up properly, but the shoulders pressed fine. This was another place that I had to be careful because there was interfacing by the shoulders, so I had to be sure not to stick my iron on that. And then I'm just finishing the edge on the facing here. I'm not double turning this. This only needs one fold because it'll be tacked down. So you really just need that edge to be clean. You don't need the inside to be clean as well. And then here I am putting on the interfacing while the side seams are not quite yet sewn. That's how the pattern tells you to do it. It makes sense because you can get the neckline really, really flat for the eventual pressing. And then after sewing that, I have clipped it and understitched it. And so now I am just ironing this flat. This facing turned out really well. I definitely am glad I went with the pattern's recommendation of not sewing the side seams up yet because I feel like I was able to get this edge really, really, really nice and pressed. And now we are finally to where we can sew up the side seams. So that is what I'm doing here. I do want to know I'm just sewing the side seams. They have me still leaving the back seams open. The whole order of operations for this dress was really interesting. It worked really well, but it was definitely a little bit different than other patterns I've done. And then this polyester is woven tight enough that I feel comfortable using pinking shears as my seam finish. And then of course I am pressing those seams nice and flat and open. And then this next step was kind of scary. So they recommended using, I think, a single fold bias. I instead used a seam finishing tape because it's thinner and won't create as much like bulk or weird wrinkling because it will sit better on the fabric. This was just the nerve-wracking part because you're sewing straight across the dress. I'm following the lines that I drew when I cut the pattern. So this wasn't like too complicated. It just definitely was a little nerve-wracking. And then the other thing that was kind of hard to figure out for this fabric was the thread matching, because obviously this fabric has big spots of a bunch of different colors. So I went with like this weird light purpley pink thread that worked really, really well on it, but it definitely like took a lot of testing before I even started filming to figure out which thread color would work the best, because I knew I was going to have all these lines sewn across the dress. So the thread needed to look really, really nice. For the second and third rows, I used a gauge to keep everything parallel. So I had the gauge marked at whatever I had it marked at, and then I'm just sewing it down and checking with the gauge every so often to make sure I am not going off course and making anything super crooked. Definitely recommend doing this when you can't use markings that are already on your sewing machine. Otherwise, there's a good chance you are not running parallel, and that's always a bummer. So with that done, I now have 3 channels to run elastic through. Before I do that, I am first hand sewing down the facing just to have that done and out of the way. And then for the elastic, I have cut the width. They recommend 3 inches larger than your waist, but that did not make sense to me because I wanted this to be a little tighter fitting than that. So I just cut it to the width of my waist because I figure it'll obviously stretch larger, and I like my clothes fairly tight. Like, that's not uncomfortable for me. So this was the method I chose to go ahead with. And then I am just putting the elastic through using a safety pin and pushing that through the channels. And then on the end, I have put a pin that is perpendicular to the elastic so that way the end doesn't get lost in there. And then the pattern instructions do not tell you to do this, but I wanted to have all of my elastic anchored before I started figuring out sewing up the back and putting in the zipper. So what I'm doing here real quick is I am just sewing down the elastic at the very edge of the channel to make sure it is looking nice and it's like nice and secured, and I don't have to worry about losing those ends while I do the back seam and the zipper. And then the last thing I am doing for today is sewing in the zipper. I feel like I'm finally back on my zipper game. I did a nice neat job because I've switched back to a placket from going like the half and half, because I just can't do a nice zipper when it's like even on both sides. I need it to just all be on one side, and this zipper was much more successful. So what I'm doing first, it's kind of hard to see because I'm navigating around a lot of different fabric, but first I am stitching very close to the zipper edge down one side, and then I am kind of doing that rectangle shape on the other side. I don't use pins while I do zippers anymore because I find that a lot of times they pull the fabric in weird ways, but obviously do what works for you. And then this is just a really nice marigold color zipper that I thought was really cute with this fabric. It's another day and another afternoon. It is almost 2 sponks. Today all I have left to do is put on the ruffles and the sleeves. This is what I have here. It is basically just the bodice of the dress. I tried it on. I like how it looks. Like, I like the shape of it, and I know it'll be a lot cuter with the ruffles and the sleeves. It's kind of just blah right now. And I put in the zipper yesterday, and I'm really proud of it. Today I'm hoping 2 to 3 hours of sewing is all I have left. We'll see. As you can see, I went to the farmer's market this morning. I went a little crazy. I got a lot of fruits and I got a lot of flowers. I also got a lot of vegetables, which you can't see here. And so, yeah, I kind of spent my morning doing that, and then it always takes me a long time to arrange the flowers. Yeah, I'm hoping this will be a pretty quick and easy finish. So fingers crossed, because I would really like to be a geek and play Sims for a long time tonight, and that only happens if this is quick. So let's go ahead and hop to it. So before I do anything else, I know later in the day I'm going to need some bias tape to finish my sleeve head seams. So I am just real quick finding places in my scraps where I can cut long enough ones to not need to sew them together to make them work for the sleeves. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm using 2 inches because then it'll be a 1/2 inch once you do all the folding. I really like if you can do the matching fabric, but I only do this when I have enough scraps to get matching fabric and when the fabric itself is not too bulky for this job. Here I am starting by sewing all of the ruffle pieces together. There are 2 ruffles on this dress, and it's just basically sewing the rectangles together. And then after those are sewn together, I am putting in the basting stitches. That will help me gather these. I do 3 rows, even though most patterns only recommend 2. I find 3 is how I get the level of neatness I like. And then I am also finishing the bottom of the ruffle. I am just doing this by a double turn hem that's about a 1/4 inch wide. So first I'm going around and folding it the first time, and then I will go around again and fold it the second time for a nice clean hem. And here I am now gathering these ruffles to fit onto the hem of the skirt. So following again all the markings, the top row and the bottom row actually have a different set of markings of where the seams go. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, it makes sense because the circumference of the bottom is bigger than the circumference of the higher ruffle. Also, who knew I would use so many math terms later in life? Unfortunately, sewing does require math, and it's, I don't know. I was about to say it's not great, but I kind of liked math, so I don't know what to say. And then after sewing in the bottom ruffle, I am pinning the top ruffle. While gathering it, I am using my gauge to again make sure everything is parallel and nothing looks weird or off here. So just trying to keep it neat, trying to make sure my measurements are precise enough that we're not going to have a crooked ruffle. And then we are just sewing that ruffle down. This is just interesting because the way this works is you sew it like underside up. I don't know, it just felt not intuitive, even though this makes total sense. And then after I finished sewing it the underside, I felt like this ruffle wanted to flop up too much. So I went ahead and then I top stitched it down about a 1/4 inch to keep the ruffle flowing down and not trying to like flip up and show the ugly underside. And then now we are onto the sleeves, the first step of the sleeve. Put the basting stitches in, but I did that off camera. And then we are putting in the channel for the elastic, sewing on one side and then the other. Same treatment as the body, just on a much smaller scale. And then I am narrow double turn hemming the bottom of the sleeve here as well. And then here I am securing the elastic again before I am sewing the 2 sides of the sleeve together. Just again doing this so I don't lose my elastic and don't have to like think about it. This time I knew exactly where to put these stitches so they didn't show in the outside of the final garment, even though this thread match was really quite good. And then here I am easing that sleeve into the armhole of the dress. These were interesting because they're like a narrow sleeve, so the gathering was just a little bit different as a result, or the sleeve shape. I don't know, the sleeve was just kind of a weird experience because I would normally do a channel after the sides of the sleeve were sewn up so I could keep it like even easier. Wow, easier. And then I also would have narrow hemmed typically the bottom all at once, but because of the way they want you to put in the elastic, that's like not how this worked. So these were just interesting sleeves, I guess. And then we are in the last step before the reveal. This is me putting in the bias tape to finish those seams around the arms. I am just sewing. I'm first sewing right sides together, and then I will be folding those up, folding them over, and folding them under, and doing this again on the other side to have these seams finished. But after that, this dress is pretty much done. I'm just gonna put in a hook and eye off camera, and then I will see you at the reveal. All right, you have seen the reveal. I hope you enjoyed seeing this dress. Before I hop into the wrap up of my thoughts, let's jump into the cost breakdown. So for this project, my fabric was $4 a yard and I used 3.5 yards. So that brings us to a total of $14 from fabric. This is fabric that I would technically put in the thrifted category. So it's not surprising, it's a pretty good price. For notions, all I had was the zipper and the thread and the elastic. So that was a total of $12.35. And then as far as my pattern was only $14.88 because it was a little bit more modern than like a 50s or 40s pattern. So it was definitely a little bit cheaper than they often are. So that brings us to supply total of $41.23. This dress is absolutely fantastic for $41.23. I'm really happy with that price because that's obviously the price I paid. I absolutely will wear it a gajillion times. So that is a perfect cost for me. And then once you get into the labor hours, we start telling a different story about the price of a garment like this. So I spent 8.5 hours on this. This was a pretty short project for me. Not super surprising because there wasn't a ton of tailoring, and what took the longest was really all the ruffling. The main body of the dress hardly took any time. And so if we multiply that 8.5 hours by 25, which is the average wage per hour that I could find for a seamstress in Seattle, you get $212.50 for labor. As always, the labor is the highest cost of the garment, and with that you get a grand total of $253.73 if you're to add labor and supplies together. So that's the scoop on this one. I think that's a great price for a dress like this. I'm more than happy, and like I said, I only paid the $41 because I'm not paying for my labor. I'm really pleased with that, but as always, this is just a little segment to kind of make you think about how much clothes cost to make if you are paying somebody a fairer wage. But anyway, let's now hop into the pros and cons of the dress. This is it. Oh, I'll put it over here. I think it fits better over here. So yeah, this is the dress. I adore this fabric. I adore the print of this fabric. It is a pretty unbreathable polyester. That's not my fave. So this will strictly be a like September through May type of dress because I'm going to sweat so much in it if I was to wear it like during the summer. So this is strictly a when it's rainy and gross out dress, which is great because it's like so bright and fun and pattern that it like really makes me smile and like kind of is mood boosting, which I guess I can go into talking about what it was like. I wore this dress for work. It was really comfortable the day I wore it. I didn't feel like I was fussing with it all day. say, which sometimes, because I am wearing vintage clothes, I do feel like I'm fussing, but because it's polyester, it didn't wrinkle. And because of the elastic, it was easy. It was really easy to deal with. And every time I looked down when I was walking and I saw these little ruffles, I just felt like really happy and cute. So that's a huge, huge win. Downsides of this dress, I guess. So I don't love the shoulders. The pattern specifically advertised that these are narrower shoulders, and I very much felt that. I definitely prefer more volume out on my shoulders as opposed to it being kind of tapered in the way it was late 60s, early 70s when this pattern was from. So I think if I was to do this in the future, I would actually switch out the sleeve but keep everything else. And also the ruffle here was just too small for my liking. I wish that was also bigger. I think that's it for cons. Normally I'm not a fan of elastic waist, but I like this waist because the 3 rows of elastic make it feel almost more like smocking, which I do like. I will definitely be using this pattern again. I think I'll probably do at some point a couple of cotton dresses out of this, maybe even just a plain white one, because I think this could potentially, without the elastic in it, be really cute for like using a corset over to like kind of give that extra oomph. So yeah, I think this would be great in like a plain white cotton. It would be really easy if you found a dress like this to get the general shape you want and just put ruffles on the bottom and do the little ruffles on the sleeves. These are really simple. And then the last thing that I'm so proud of, look at this zipper. I don't know if you guys can tell, but it is beautiful. This is the most beautiful zipper I've put in a long time. It really shows that I need to slow down and put in the effort into a zipper, because a lot of times the zipper is at the end of a project when I'm just kind of tired and I want to be done, and so I don't put the adequate time into it, and so then I just don't do as good of a job. But this is a beautiful zipper, and I think because this was a shorter project, I still had that stamina to take my time with the zipper. And then also it shows the difference of a hook and eye closure at the top. I need to be much more in the habit of putting in a hook and eye closure on the things that I make. A lot of times I skip that step, and I will say it makes this zipper look significantly neater. So I will definitely be doing that in the future. I am bummed. I did plan to do this dress with French seams and I totally spaced it, so they're just pinked inside. I think that's okay. It didn't bother me sensory wise as much as I thought it would. I absolutely adore this dress. So I have about 4 yards of this fabric left. I think I'm gonna make a really fun pair of overalls with it. But yeah, that concludes this project. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This was really a beautiful mix of a wearable dress as well as something fun. So I hope you enjoyed this fall bright colored dress to get us excited and ready for fall. And this is, I think this is the 3rd project of 6 Weeks of Spooky. It might be the 4th, I can't remember. Definitely subscribe and stick around if you haven't already. I'm going to have a few more Halloween themed sewing projects coming up that I'm really, really excited about. So stay tuned for that. And then as always, you can like or comment down below. It always helps me in the almighty algorithm. And other than that, I will see you next time. Bye!